everybody, and in today's video what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to break down the elimination and or gun game template that was created by Epic Games. I do believe they created this, and basically I think this is one of the best templates that you can kind of just get started with and start developing inside of UEFN. A lot of times when I teach UEFN, this is generally the first template I go to because of how easy it is to kind of get going and to learn some things. And so today, using this template, we are going to build a simple gun game. So to get started here, obviously you would boot up UEFN through the Epic Games Launcher, come down here to Featured Examples, Game Examples, and then Eliminations, and then you just click Create, and it will start to create this. Now, this video is going to assume that you have some knowledge of how UEFN works, meaning that you understand how to launch the session, you understand how to check in changes, you understand how to save things, and you understand also the basic UI on the screen, such as the viewport here, what the outliner tab is, what verse is, and the details panel. If you don't know any of that stuff, then please just go back and watch the tutorial series. I pretty much cover all of that kind of stuff earlier in the series, and I'm just not going to cover it again because it's really not that essential for the video. Cool. Alright, now that this is all done loading up, let's just go ahead and take a look around the scene here. If you right click on the mouse and use WSA&D, you have the ability to move around. And here it is. So this is the current default template. Hopefully they don't get rid of this one. I actually really like this one, as I kind of said before. And yeah, why don't we go ahead and launch a session real quick. For those of you who don't understand how a gun game works, let me go ahead and break it down for you. So a gun game basically works like this. Two or more players will spawn into the game, and then basically when one player is eliminated by another player, then basically the player that got the elimination will receive a new weapon, right? So basically that's what it is. And then basically there's a certain amount of weapons you would go through, and then after you go through all the weapons, or after a certain time limit is reached, whoever got the farthest along the chain and or completed the chain of weapons is the winner of the gun game, and that's basically how this template works. The manager that manages all of this is this verse device right here. They named it the Elimination Game Template, and we'll be touching on this here in a second. But this is basically the starting room here, and then you also have this border outside. I don't know why they didn't use a border device. This actually is 4 planes. Normally you could use a barrier device for that, but they decided to use 4 planes. Alright, so without further ado, let me go ahead and explain some basic stuff here. For whatever it's worth, obviously, when the player is playing the game, they have the ability to like jump over this railing here and jump down and hit this mutator zone device. So by default, this template, if you come over here, uh, if you look at the mutator zone device, they have an event here on a player entering the zone. Basically, they're going to teleport. So when they touch this thing here, they're going to come over here and they're going to teleport over to this teleporter, which is right here. Right, so basically wherever you move this teleporter is wherever the player is going to go when they jump in. And then basically over here you have spawn locations. Most students don't like the fact that they spawn literally right next to each other. So most of the time they like move the spawn points around and all of that stuff. So like maybe there would be like a spawn point over here and like I guess a spawn point over here. And you, of course you can create multiple different spawn points throughout the level. So we'll kind of put this one maybe over here, for example, and just rotate it 90 degrees. Cool. All right, so that's basically like a decent little setup tour here. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the stuff going on the back end of the game, or the verse logic. At the very end of the tutorial, I'll kind of open up this device and talk a little bit about the verse code and how to manipulate it a little bit. But the main things you got to make sure this game is working here is, first off, you have to make sure that there's an end game device and that it is registered here as the end game device. If you don't have that, then this game cannot end. The back end of the game does require the end game device to be in the level and assigned here in order for it to work. And then as you can also see, this device also has a editable instance here of weapon granters basically. And as you can see, it's an array here of weapon granters. And basically these are going to be what gives you weapons when you get eliminations. So this actively tracks and gives players eliminations, and then these weapon granters, as you can see here, is what actively tracks eliminations and gives players weapons. So if you want to alter the weapons given to you, basically you want to come here into the Outliner tab, and underneath the item granters here, underneath the gameplay folder, you have these weapons here, and basically you would then come here to the details panel right here underneath item list, and you would add the weapon and or weapons or items a player would get when they get an elimination. Now, by default, the order in which you are given these items is randomized. So basically, the first game, you could get this one. The next game, you could start out and you could get this one to start, or this one. That's how it's set up by default. I can show you all how to change that. I'll show that at the end of the video. It's not uber complicated, but that is basically the basic setup here. All these settings do need to be the same across all these weapon granters, and basically it's clear inventory, current item, item list, and that's basically it. Enabled on game start, all that good stuff here. Now, let's say I wanted to add more items here so that the game would go longer or whatever. Basically, all you would need to do is hold Alt here and drag, and it's going to duplicate this instance. You can also hold Control and click D as well, and both of these situations will work to create a new item granter. Now, this isn't enough though. So even though I've created this new item granter here, item granter 5, the backend or this verse device here doesn't actually know that that new item granter exists. So what I need to do so it's registered in with the backend and it actually feeds into the like item giving loop is I need to come here and click the plus here and create a new index or position in this array, and I click the plus here and then I assign this to item granter 5, and this is what registers this item here with this verse device, so that way your verse device knows what items to give and what items not to give. And basically that's a breakdown of this. Let's go ahead and toggle on over to the island settings because there are a couple of important things in the island settings. But if you want to change up any of the items that are given to you and basically all of that, that's basically how you do it right there. All right, enough about that. Let's go ahead and touch on the island settings. So in the island settings, basically like all the movement and shields and stuff like that that you're going to get when you start the game are going to be in here. So basically things like shield percentage, max shield, starting shield percentage. Do you want them to be able to recharge shield? Do you want an overshield? Right? If you ever played Fortnite Zero build, you'll know what overshield is. But basically, like all of that stuff is all right here. And then same thing with health. So if I come over here to health, for example, health granted on elimination, starting health percentage, max health, recharge of health, all of this stuff right here is again kind of health, and then of course movements as well. Mantling is turned off here. So if you want to allow mantling, you would do that. Sprinting, I also believe, is also turned off by default in this template. So you can't sprint, but if you wanted to change the sprint, the speed, and the jump, and all of that, it would all be right here. And basically that's where like a lot of the movement settings are going to exist. And then there's also one other really important setting basically for this, and that's the allow build setting is number 1. So generally this is no build, so you would want to set this to none. If you do want builds, make sure that you have like the ability to destroy the builds and all that kind of stuff also registered in here. But yeah, generally gun games don't have building. You could add building if you wanted to, and this is the place where you customize the building if you needed to. But I generally set it to none. And then the other thing is the time limit. So there is a time limit. I think it's just called time limit. Yeah, so end condition time limit. Yeah, so if you don't want a time limit, I would definitely check this one off. So basically this means the game is going to continue on and on and on and on and on and on and on until basically somebody has gotten all the weapons and then it ends. Or you could set a time limit right here. And basically it would end at the end of that time limit. And yeah, that's pretty much self-explanatory. And that's basically it for the template other than the actual map building part of it, right? So like obviously if you want to stick with this kind of map here and like further expand it out, generally what I have people do is I have people come over here and just start deleting things like here. So we can get rid of this lock device, for example, we can get rid of the storeway, and we can just hold Alt and drag here and start creating a new section of the map, kind of like this. Obviously we need to move this barrier device back. But but I'll just create a little quick new section for you all. But basically, this is how I generally would have somebody do it. And all I'm doing here is holding Alt to my keyboard and dragging with the mouse here. If I hold shift just like I'm doing now, I can select multiple different instances basically, and now when I hold shift and drag again, it's going to duplicate all of that. Boom, and I can kind of align things however I want. Obviously I can expand this out some, so if I rotate this 90, and yeah, basically like you could go about that for redesigning an area in the map. Just make this a little bit longer. And there we go. So that's basically how I would go about it. Obviously this isn't the only way to do it. There are of course many other ways, but that's just one way if you wanted to do it that way. Let's just expand this out a little bit. There we go. Cool. All right, so that basically just wraps up the basics of this. Very last thing I'm going to do here is kind of talk about the verse code that exists in here. It is a little complex, but there is a couple important things that you can change in here and a couple cool edits that you can do to the verse code. So if I click here, I can go into Elimination Game Device or Gun Game Manager, double click on it here. By the way, they do have a whole breakdown of this in the UEFN documentation. Let me see. Uh, so if you want more information on how they made like all of this stuff, let's see here. Should be in the documentation. If I can find it for you. Here we go. So that's a one shotgun game, but there's quite a few different like communities and stuff like that that basically kind of go over like everything that you can do here. They also have one for box fighting too if you wanted to make a box fight map. But yeah, I would definitely check out this website if you want to learn more about the coding aspect here. But I'm just going to basically run through here and talk about the basics. So here are all the modules they import. You really don't want to touch this or mess with this unless you really know what you're doing. Same thing here. This is just logging stuff in the channels. This is a verse reference to get verse. And then basically here's where they create the editable variables that you have access to right in here. So basically like when I click on this here, and I have the ability to manipulate this stuff right here, basically right here is where that's declared. So that's where they declare that, and they declare it as a weapon granter array, and then a endgame device. And then here's some private variables. So basically they have number of eliminations to win. And then they also have the agents that exist in the game. Agents are like players. So yeah. And then basically here, when the game starts, here's just some logic that basically grants players weapons, checks to see like how many players and stuff like that, and basically also ties on player eliminated, which is this function right here, to when a player is eliminated. There's the event finding and all of that kind of stuff for all the players, right? And basically this is the for loop that inits that. On player eliminated, this is what's responsible for giving a player weapon. And then basically when a weapon is granted, right? There's also the victory condition, which determines whether they've won or not, which is here, right? This ends the game, right? But this determines whether you win or not. And then here's the end game. And then basically here's the grant item if we don't end the game. So the code isn't that super complex. There is one line of code here that if you want to change, it basically changes it so that the weapons are granted in the order rather than based on like a random order. And that's shuffle. So they do shuffle somewhere in here. Here it is. So right here on line 44, if you want to make it so that the item granters aren't randomized, then you would delete this line here. But if you want to make it so that the items are not random or excuse me, are random, then you would keep this line in. So keep this for randomness, basically, and as you can see here, it says it right here. Keep it for randomness, but if you don't want it random, then you don't keep this. And I mean, that's pretty much it for this template, guys. Let me know if you all have any questions. I pretty much covered everything about this template. Obviously, you can open up the content drawer and add as much cool stuff from here that you want. But yeah, so I hope this video helped. If it did, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.